you know, there was no such thing as academic study centers for athletes, you know, the way we have now, and tutors and all of those things. He was very strict in a lot of ways. His players had to conduct themselves as gentlemen at all times. And I was just thinking this morning, I think something rather unique on every road trip, whether it was bus to Moorhead or to Western or a Christmas tournament that we flew down to Texas and played A&M and Texas Tech. Every basketball player, we wore a sport coat, shirt and tie. In the winter, we had a top coat and a hat. And that was the traveling uniform that you had. And that's the way we traveled, you know. And you had to conduct yourself as a gentleman at all times, or you would definitely hear about it.
Now another legendary figure was Gertrude Hood.
Yes.
Was here a long time. Tell us a little bit about her.
Okay. Gertrude Hood, she was at Eastern 44 years, and she was kind of the counterpart to Mr. Hughes. And she was a little bit of everything. Very strong-willed individual. If she felt that something needed to be done, even with President Martin, she didn't mind. She'd knock on his office door and walk in and say, "This is what's going on and this is what I need," and he usually would say, "Yes, ma'am," and would give it to her.
Probably one of the few people that Martin treated like that.
Yes, but she was unique also is that she lived in Weaver Health Building. Down, which is, I guess, currently the women's locker room and everything, there was a very small apartment, and I was never in it. I really don't know the size of it, but I'm sure it was just a, you know, sleeping, living accommodations was about all. And she had her little bulldog that she kept called Smokey that lived there also. It was kind of one of the Weaver pets. But she taught.
But that just tells us that her whole life was around Eastern.
Around Eastern, like I said, she was here 44 years.
In the Weaver building.
In the Weaver building, particularly. But she taught a lot of the classes that dealt with physical activity for elementary school children. And elementary school teachers and all physical education majors had to take several of those classes, you know, of what would be appropriate classes and games and activities for young kids, you know, second graders, third graders, sixth graders, whatever. And she taught all of those. She also was one of the first, I guess, that you could say women's coaches. She taught field hockey, and there was, you know, I guess today it'd be called a sports club. You know, no scholarships or anything, but Eastern had a field hockey team in their sports club. And, you know, we have Gertrude Hood Field, which was the field hockey field. And, you know, they would have games against, you know, Moorhead and Brea and Asbury and other ladies. And it was not just physical education students, it was any Eastern student that wished to participate in field hockey. So, she was an early proponent of women participating in athletics.
And how did that evolve into the women's athletics that we know today?
Well, at that time, when I was an undergraduate, I guess, 59 through 63, all women's sports or athletics really was the club sport model. We had a varsity basketball team, women's team, but it was a club sport, no scholarships, just for the women, you know, on campus. Or some of them, I'm sure, were maybe recruited to come to Eastern to play on their basketball, but there's no scholarships. They had the women's tennis team. They had some participation in track and field with various people, but it was all on a club sport type of thing. And I think she kind of got that started. I know that once she retired, Dr. Pegley Stanlin took over as field hockey, you know, coach, and there's still no scholarships or anything along that line. There was no track and field scholarships. Dr. Dodd Harkins taught in the physical education department, and she taught kind of like a women's track and field class.
Well, we're almost out of time, Paul, and this has been such a pleasure talking about this, but And I've been here almost as long as you have, and most of these things I didn't know about till I talked to you. But we can't depart a discussion about EKU athletics without talking about our Hall of Fame football coach, Roy Kidd. What were some of your early memories of Roy in that era of football?
Okay. Well, my earliest memory of Roy is that not only as a young man I watched him play at Eastern, but you know, one of his first jobs was you know, after he went to Madison Central, I think for a year or two, because they were going to start a football program there and did not. He came to Madison Motley as a football coach, and I think I was a freshman. He was my basketball coach as a freshman. Because you know, in high school, if you were a football coach, you also help in other sports and things. And Zeb Blankenship, who was the head basketball coach, was assistant football coach with him. So I knew him from that standpoint. And Roy was an innovator in football, and as a student, you could see that. And knowing him at Madison, today I guess they would call it the spread offense. I remember put in a passing attack. He'd throw the ball anytime, anywhere, under any circumstance. 1967, after I got out of the service, and with that really great team that he had that won the Grantland Rice Bowl game, Bud Wilkerson, who had just stepped down as the coach at Oklahoma, was the commentator on that, and he just couldn't believe the wide open offense that we had. It was a ball control offense by throwing it. And he just kind of recruited players, very honest up front with them. They knew where they stood. It was a family. And, you know, with his wife, Susan, you know, they talk about their football family, and they just brought these kids in, and they stayed 4 years with him, and he was a legend.
So there are lots of similarities really among all of the folks that you've talked about in terms of the way that they accomplished things and the standards that they had and the way they treated their players.
Right, and I think most of his football players, especially early on, were student athletes. They graduated. They went into many facets of life. You know, they have the Warren Cleat Club that come back and support him. You know, there are dentists, there are physicians, there are a lot of people that he had in his program, and they feel very, very closely about him.
We've had a lot of interesting discussion about EKU then and now, particularly in terms of athletics and physical education. And our guest has been Dr. Paul Motley. And Paul, thank you. We'll have more of these conversations, but if you all have any idea about people or topics that you'd like to talk about, just contact us. Thank you and good evening.